The story begins in the early 1990s in Australia. A young girl named Natalie is watching Pretty Woman and enjoying it. Her happiness fades when her mother enters the room and tells her she shouldn't watch romantic comedies. Her mother says that women like her and Natalie don't get happy endings like the beautiful women in these movies, such as Julia Roberts. These words break Natalie's spirit and make her enjoy the movie less. 25 years later, Natalie is now an architect living in New York City. She feels invisible and unimportant at work, often being treated as a pushover by her coworkers. In her eyes, she's just the coffee girl, the one people call on to fetch drinks. Natalie's only friends are Josh, her kind-hearted coworker, and Whitney, her cheerful assistant. One day, Natalie and her team get a new client, a handsome billionaire named Blake. When she joins the meeting, Blake mistakes the coffee she's holding as his own. When he complains, her boss sides with him and tells Natalie to get Blake a fresh cup. Embarrassed, she leaves to do as told. Later, Natalie sees Whitney watching The Wedding Singer and crying. Annoyed, Natalie criticizes her for liking romantic comedies and launches into a long rant about why these movies are unrealistic and harmful. She points out all the cliches and how they give people false hopes about love. Her harsh words upset Whitney. Josh, who has been trying to be supportive, invites Natalie to hang out, but she brushes him off rudely. Whitney later tells Natalie that if she were more open and positive, people would notice her more. Natalie shrugs it off, feeling like nothing will ever change. After a long day, Natalie boards the subway to head home. As the train moves along, she notices a guy on the opposite train trying to get her attention. They lock eyes, and he seems friendly at first, but suddenly, he lunges at her and tries to grab her bag. A struggle ensues, and Natalie fights back fiercely. She manages to disable him and starts to run away, relieved, but as she dashes down the platform, she trips and slams face first into a pole, knocking herself unconscious. When Natalie regains consciousness, she finds herself in a hospital room. A handsome doctor greets her, but instead of feeling comforted, she feels more creeped out by his flirtations. After being discharged, she decides to leave, eager to put the strange experience behind her. As she steps out of the hospital, she notices something odd. The usual smell of New York, the stench of trash and pollution, is gone. Instead, the air smells fresh, like lavender. Confused but intrigued, Natalie walks toward the street and, just as she's about to cross, Blake's limo unexpectedly pulls up and hits her. He gets out, more charming than ever, and insists on taking her home. Within minutes, she's in his car. Before leaving, Blake writes his phone number on flower petals and hands them to Natalie. He acts as though it's normal for her to remember the number, despite giving it to her in random order. After he drives off, Natalie stands in front of her apartment building, still in disbelief. She walks into her apartment, only to find it completely transformed. It's bigger, nicer, and somehow everything feels luxurious. She's surprised to see that she now owns every pair of shoes imaginable, and each one fits her perfectly. Her dog, who was always unruly, is now calm and well-groomed. As she walks around, she notices something else. Her grumpy neighbor, Donnie, has completely changed. No longer the sour, quiet man he once was, Donnie is now a flamboyant, overly dramatic figure who acts like a stereotypical gay best friend, offering her advice and excitement at every turn. At work, Natalie is stunned to find that her assistant Whitney is no longer working for her. Instead, Whitney is now her professional rival, competing with her for attention and recognition. Everything feels off to Natalie, as if the world has shifted into a strange, exaggerated version of reality. Needing some air, Natalie takes a walk with Josh. As they stroll through the park, they come across a woman choking. Josh rushes to help her, and it turns out she is a stunning swimsuit model named Isabella, the same woman from the billboard outside their office that Natalie always assumed Josh was staring at. There's an undeniable spark between Josh and Isabella, and they quickly hit it off. Without hesitation, they leave together, leaving Natalie behind to fend for herself. Feeling dejected, Natalie continues wandering through the park. As she randomly trips on things, she notices something bizarre. Every time she stumbles, a handsome man appears to compliment her, as if it's part of some elaborate script. Adding to the strangeness, groups of people around her suddenly burst into dance routines for no reason. Piecing it all together, Natalie realizes that she is somehow stuck in a PG-13 romantic comedy. Determined to escape, Natalie tries everything she can think of to undo this bizarre situation. She attempts to knock herself unconscious again, hoping it will bring her back to reality, but this only makes her seem crazy to the men around her. At one point, she even steps in front of a subway train, but before she can follow through, a cop, fittingly named Officer Handsome, pulls her back to safety. He scolds her and arrests her for not paying her subway fare. At the police station, Natalie is allowed one phone call. She reluctantly decides to contact Blake, the billionaire, and to her surprise, the flower petals with his number magically rearrange themselves into the correct order so she can dial him. Blake answers and quickly comes to pick her up. While riding in his limo, Natalie has an epiphany. She decides that the only way to escape this rom-com world is to follow its rules. She must get Blake to fall in love with her. Convinced that this is the key, she sets her plan into motion. Natalie enlists the help of her flamboyant neighbor, Donnie, for a classic off-screen makeover montage. After trying on countless outfits, experimenting with hairstyles, and perfecting her look, Natalie emerges glammed up and ready for her date with Blake. The date goes surprisingly well. Blake charms her with his suave demeanor, and they end the evening sharing a romantic kiss in the middle of a city street, surrounded by shimmering lights and a conveniently timed breeze. Natalie feels like she's finally making progress toward escaping the rom-com world. Blake takes her back to his luxurious penthouse, and things heat up as they move toward the bedroom. But just as the moment gets intimate, the screen abruptly cuts to the next morning. Confused and frustrated, Natalie tries to have sex with Blake 2 more times, but each attempt skips over the act and jumps straight to the next day. No matter how hard she tries, she can't seem to experience anything beyond the PG-13 boundaries of her world. The next morning, Blake professes his love for Natalie. She hopes this might finally be the key to breaking free, but nothing changes. She's still stuck, and her frustration grows. Later, Josh visits Natalie at her apartment, bringing Chinese takeout with him. The two share a relaxed and lighthearted evening, laughing and joking in a way that feels genuine and natural. Natalie notices the effortless chemistry between them and starts to feel a sense of comfort she hadn't experienced with Blake. Their moment is interrupted when Blake unexpectedly shows up. His demeanor toward Josh is cold and condescending, and he makes a series of rude comments that embarrass Josh and drive him to leave. Natalie watches as Josh walks out, feeling torn and increasingly unsure of what she truly wants. Natalie and Blake unexpectedly run into Josh and Isabella while out. To Natalie's surprise, Isabella enthusiastically invites them to a party at her place in the Hamptons. Reluctantly, Natalie and Blake accept. At the Hamptons party, Natalie finds herself walking along the beach with Josh, and they share another heartfelt conversation. The chemistry between them grows, and Natalie starts to realize she might have feelings for him. However, her hopes are dashed when Josh and Isabella suddenly announce to the group that they are getting married the next day. Natalie hides her disappointment, but the news leaves her reeling. Later, everyone heads to a nearby bar for karaoke. Natalie decides to sing, "I Wanna Dance with Somebody," hoping to lift her spirits. Midway through her performance, a waitress accidentally unplugs the microphone. Undeterred, Natalie keeps singing, and the crowd quickly joins in. The moment turns into an elaborate, spontaneous musical number, complete with choreography and harmonies. For a brief moment, Natalie feels the magic of the rom-com world working in her favor. The next morning, however, Natalie overhears Blake trying to pass off her architectural ideas as his own during a phone call. When she confronts him, Blake casually dismisses her concerns, saying she won't need to work once they're together. This infuriates Natalie, as she realizes how much she values her career and independence. She breaks up with Blake, leaving him stunned. Upset and uncertain, Natalie seeks advice from Donnie. He shares a heartfelt story from his own life, inspiring Natalie to take control of her own happiness. Encouraged by his words, Natalie decides she must do the ultimate rom-com move, stopping a wedding in slow motion. Natalie races to the church, bursting in just as Josh and Isabella are about to exchange vows. She gives a passionate speech, initially intending to confess her love for Josh. But as she speaks, Natalie has a revelation. The lesson she was meant to learn isn't about loving someone else, it's about loving herself. She realizes that self-love and confidence are the keys to her happiness, not chasing someone else's approval. Feeling liberated, Natalie leaves the wedding before it concludes. On her way out, she impulsively decides to steal the brand new car meant for Josh and Isabella's getaway. However, she becomes distracted and accidentally drives the car head first into a wall. Natalie wakes up in another hospital room, confused and unsure if she's still trapped in the rom-com world. She notices the doctor attending to her is an attractive, suave man who seems to be flirting with her. Fearing she's still stuck, she starts to panic. However, an older, no-nonsense doctor walks in and reveals the younger man is just an actor practicing for a role. Natalie pulls the IV needle out of her arm and, in frustration, yells, "Fuck." Realizing she can curse again, she breathes a sigh of relief. She's finally back in the real world. Natalie rushes home, overjoyed to see her cramped, messy apartment and her scruffy, disobedient dog. She even embraces the familiar chaos of her life. Outside, she runs into Donnie and discovers that he's actually gay in real life, just not the over-the-top stereotype from the rom-com world. He's also a weed dealer, which amuses Natalie. She hugs him, grateful for his presence in her real life. Back at work, Natalie reconnects with Whitney and apologizes for her earlier behavior. She reaffirms their friendship but lays down a boundary, telling Whitney she can't keep watching movies at work. Whitney playfully agrees. Natalie then heads into a meeting with her boss and Blake to pitch her design for a parking garage for Blake's new hotel. Blake is impressed with her presentation, and even her boss seems to acknowledge her talent for the first time. Feeling confident and validated, Natalie walks over to Josh's cubicle. She tells Josh he shouldn't waste his time fantasizing about Isabella on the billboard outside. Josh laughs and gestures for Natalie to sit in his chair. From his perspective, it's clear he doesn't even have a full view of the billboard. Instead, he was always looking at Natalie. Touched by his confession, Natalie realizes the depth of his feelings for her. They share a heartfelt kiss, cementing their connection. Later, Natalie steps outside to grab coffee and meets Whitney downstairs. Whitney playfully remarks that now Natalie has her dream job and a guy who adores her. It's almost like she's living in a real-life romantic comedy. Natalie scoffs at the idea and jokingly replies that the only thing missing is a musical number. As the screen cuts to the credits, the entire cast breaks into a lively, colorful musical number, dancing and singing in true rom-com fashion, wrapping up Natalie's journey with a joyful celebration. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.